Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good day, everyone. Remember from the previous chapter, short-run fluctuation may occur because change or shift in aggregate demand and or aggregate supply curve. We also understand that there will always be adjustment to get back to the long-run equilibrium condition. The problem is we don't know how long the adjustment will take place. That is why the suggestion is to adopt certain policy to eradicate the unexpected economic condition. In terms of economic stabilization policy, the two most common policies are monetary and fiscal policies. Both influence the aggregate demand in the short run, and we will soon figure it out how. We begin with the monetary policy. Last time, when we were talking about the three reasons why the eddy curve slopes downward, one of the effects is the interest rate effect. I mentioned that change in price affects the output through money market. Money market then determines the equilibrium interest rate. Returning to the real sector, the change in interest rate will then affect the aggregate demand through investment. What about our loanable fund market that also determined the interest rate in our past discussions? Well, we're not talking about it here, unfortunately. Our loanable fund market we have discussed so far is within the long-run framework. Y is at its natural level in the long run, thus it tends to be unchanged and also unaffected by change in nominal variable like prices. So if you would like to use it again in the short run, there should be some adjustment, most importantly to allow saving change following change in income or Y. Okay, to make it simple, let's just see the money market. The theory we use is called the theory of liquidity preferences from Keynes. And according to this theory, interest rate is determined from the interaction between money supply and money demand. So the point A here. What interest rate? Well, we can use both. With relatively stable expected inflation in the short run, nominal and real interest rate will move in tandem. Money supply curve is drawn as a vertical line since it is determined by the monetary authority, meaning no influence from interest rate. It will shift if the monetary authority change the money supply with any monetary instruments it has. On the other hand, money demand curve is downward sloping, showing the negative correlation between interest rate and demand for holding money or preference of people for liquidity. It's called the liquidity preference because money is the most liquid asset. And interest rate here is the opportunity cost of holding money. If interest rate is high, the opportunity cost of holding money is high too. So people prefers holding less money. With high interest rate, he or she can get the interest rate return from buying interest-bearing bonds or interest-bearing bank accounts. With the theory in mind, then it's easy to see the interest rate effect when price changes. For instance, here increases from P1 to P2. Look at the money market diagram here. Higher price means more money needed to facilitate the transaction of goods and services. Demand for money then increases and the curve shifts to the right. With fixed money supply, the excess money demand then will increase the equilibrium interest rate. Equilibrium moves from C to D. The resulting higher interest rate from price increase will lower the aggregate demand and the Y, because cost of borrowing is now higher and it lowers the investment. So we can observe here in the aggregate demand diagram, price increase results in lower Y or movement along the aggregate demand curve from point A to point B. Now, how if monetary policy is adopted? Monetary expansion policy increases money supply. Higher money supply shifts the MS curve to the right from MS to MS prime. Now we have excess money supply that leads to the new equilibrium at B at lower equilibrium interest rate and higher quantity of money. Again, the change in interest rate is reflected in aggregate demand curve. Lower interest rate will increase AD because investment is now higher. At the same price, P bar, Y increases from Y1 to Y2. Since the source of change is not from price, AD or aggregate output is higher at any given price. It means AD curve shifts to the right. The opposite will occur if monetary contraction, for instance, is adopted. Money supply decreases, money supply MS curve shifts to the left, interest rate is now higher. Higher interest rate decreases AD at any given price level, AD shifts to the left. Monetary policy can also be described either in terms of the money supply or in terms of the interest rate. Expansionary monetary policy can be described either as increasing money supply or as lowering interest rate. Targeting lower interest rate means that the monetary authority conduct whatever open market operations are necessary to ensure the interest rate is lower. For sure, the result of the open market operation is more money supply now available and lower interest rate. As for fiscal policy, government set the level of government spending and net taxation. Remember the aggregate demand equations. Y is expressed as C plus I plus G plus NX. So reducing tax will increase consumption, and higher consumption means higher consumptions means higher aggregate demand. Higher government spending also increases the aggregate demand. So since the change in tax and government spending affect aggregate demand at any given price, fiscal policy would shift the ID curve. Y will be higher or lower at any given price as a consequence. What we have to know as well is that when G increases or tax decreases, for instance, yes, aggregate demand or Y increases, but it doesn't stop here. Since consumption is affected by Y, higher Y will cause higher C2. Higher C will increase Y. Higher Y will increase again C, C to Y again, and so on and so forth. This additional impact to Y from consumption is called the multiplier effect. It shifts the eddy curve further to the right. So if G, for example, increases by 5 billion, Y will increase more than 5 billion for sure. As can be seen from here, this is the initial impact when G increases. Y increases from Y1 to Y2. And this is the multiplier effect. Y increases from Y2 to Y3. How to calculate the full effect? Let's write the equation more completely. Suppose C function is linear. C equals to A plus marginal propensity to consume, or MPC, times Y minus T, or disposable income. MPC is delta C over delta Y, or the impact of Y to C. So we have Y equals this, A plus MPC, Y minus T plus I plus G plus NX, and with simplification we got this, and look, the final result is here. Y is expressed solely on the left side of the equation, and Y is here, A minus MPCT plus I plus G plus NX per 1 minus MPC. And then we can find the impact of change in G to Y, which is delta Y over delta G. It is equal to 1 per 1 minus MPC. This is what we call as government spending multiplier. And we can also find out the impact of change in T to Y from the equation, which is delta Y over delta T equals to minus MPC per 1 minus MPC. Just like before, this is now what we call as tax multiplier. So if MPC, for example, is 80%, the multiplier is 1 per 1 minus 80%, or equal to 5. Meaning what? Meaning that any increase in G will result in an increase in Y 5 times the increase of G. With MPC is again equal to 80%, we can also find the tax multiplier is minus 80% per 1 minus 80% equals to minus 4. So we can see if G, for instance, increases by 10 billion, Y will increase 5 times bigger, which is 50 billions. When T, for instance, increases by 10 billion, what's going to happen to Y? Y will decrease by 4 times 10, or equals to 40 billion. Lastly, before we're talking about the policy effectiveness, we see the interaction between money market and real market again. The increase in G or the decrease in T in our previous discussion has resulted in increase in Y. It further increases the Y because of the multiplier effect. However, it again doesn't stop here. Suppose from the previous process, increase in G or decrease in T plus the multiplier effect has caused AD curve shift to the right, and at P bar, increase Y from Y1 to Y2. When Y increases, it impacts the money market actually. With more income, money demand will be higher, and money demand curve as a consequence shifts to the right from MD to MD prime, leading to a higher equilibrium level of interest rate at point B. And then returning to the AD curve, AD will then shift to the left because higher interest rate will reduce I, then the AD, and eventually the Y. So Y decreases from Y2 to Y3, and the process is what we call as the crowding out effect. So the total effect of the expansionary fiscal policy, despite the crowding out effect, here as we can see, has increased Y as well as interest rate. Okay, as you can read from the textbook, the stabilization policy using fiscal and or monetary policy can be active, can be against the use of any policy, or can be relying to the so-called economic stabilizer. We'll be talking in more detail about this in chapter 36, so I will just explain it briefly now. Active stabilization policy is needed to cure the economic from recession. Fiscal policy in particular could even give impact to the long-run economic growth. Tax cut or tax credit, for instance, not only increases the aggregate demand in the short run, it may also affect the aggregate supply in the long run because with higher disposable income and lower cost of doing investment, economy could purchase more capital. Economists who are against the active stabilization policy argue that both fiscal and monetary policy always works with lags. Monetary policy is usually responded with a long lag because many firms make investment plans far in advance, while the impacts may last for several years. Therefore, monetary policy ends up being a cost of rather than a cure of short-run economic fluctuation. Lag in fiscal policy, on the other hand, is largely attributable to the political process because the policy usually needs approval from the legislative. Lastly, automatic stabilizer means that no deliberate actions taken by the policymakers to stabilize the economy. When there is recession, for instance, tax will be lower because almost all taxes are closely tied to economic activity. Lower tax may shift the AD to the right. The same is true with the government spending. With recession, there will be more unemployment. The then unemployed person will apply more for unemployment insurance benefit, welfare benefits, and other forms of income support, which surely increase government spending, thus shifting the AD to the right to automatically. Okay, so that's all from me. Thank you for the attention. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.